as Linda said, is a co-working space for tech startups, hardware startups mainly. And so I wanted to focus a little bit on startup journey and key milestones. One of the first questions I had was, we try to help our members to secure customers, or even the first customer. And how did you do it? I know, Stina, you mentioned already that you went for Google first.
Oh no, that was 4 years after we started. Oh God, we tried. The first year no one wanted our product, because this is the challenge, especially in security. You're trying to sell something, and then security is about trust. And if you don't have any customers, how can you build that trust? So it's sort of that catch. Yeah. And I went and I presented this for online banks in Sweden, and they said, come back when you have 50,000 customers. Like, how can I get to my 50,000 customers? And then I was really happy to sort of, some of these serendipity moments that just changes things. A company wanted to license our product and become a partner, and I was almost giving up at the time. I was like, okay, I'm not going to do my own thing, I'm going to go through another partner. And then that partnership ended completely when they were going to supposed to show us at the big conference in San Francisco, at the trade show. And so I was there and had no partners, no customers, basically nothing. I was like, God, this is not going so well. When I realized, here's all these cool journalists who probably want to talk about my product. And I'm happy to run into a journalist. And he came up with a podcast that went out to 100,000 people, where he said, this cool key I got from a woman on an escalator. Because I didn't have a booth. I didn't have a I was just like walking around and trying to get journalists to talk. That was really guerrilla marketing. I was desperate. And sometimes when you're desperate, either you give up and you're angry and bitter because life isn't nice to you, or you sort of start that, that sixth gear where you're just like, I'm gonna do whatever it takes.
At this point, how long had Yubico been going for?
That was just 1 year. But with that podcast became our first customers. 100,000 people heard this podcast, a guy saying, this is the coolest authentication hardware ever. And then he brought me in to present it on his podcast. So it was a follow-up. And someone at Google listened to that podcast. And and there are 2 people I actually hired who also listened to that podcast, who called me up, I want to work for you. I don't know what you're really doing, but it sounds really cool. So that was basically, that was how it all got started. And that wasn't the plan. It wasn't like, I'm going to go to a conference in San Francisco, and I'm going to meet a guy at an escalator, and then I'm going to launch my product.
Did serendipity have anything to do with finding the first customer, or was it much more planned? And how?
For HMS, it was always key to have a demanding customer, and that changed in different phases. It started with a machine builder. Some key persons from the Swedish company Atlas Copco saw this network system in the machine and said, this is how we're going to build machines. Networked. Today we call it IoT. Back then that didn't exist. Atlas helped me get in touch with a Japanese big company. By that, and serving them and selling them, small volumes still. I got in touch with, in robotics, the Google would be Yaskawa Robotics in Japan. At the time, the world's biggest robot maker would be the Google of robots. And that became HMS' biggest customer for more than 10 years. But the similarity is, you said before, your first business plan was the desktop. It's the same in my case, and that business plan didn't come up when I started the company. It came after a visit in Japan when I realized that, God, the volumes are not that I can sell 10,000 of these. It's 100,000 to each customer, and I can get this Google of robots as customer, and when I get them, I can sell to all the robot makers. I think that's a very similar story, even though the companies are completely different. So,
and for me, it was actually interesting because my business was sort of out of a, you're forced to be creative, because I didn't have any customers or money or investors, and that do I have to focus on only a few customers who have the best leverage? So, I mean, you found who has the best leverage, you know, and that is when things are going well. You don't have to be that creative. Because then you're like, I can sell to anyone. I have money, I have people, I have marketing, I have investors. But if you're sort of forced to be cautious and thoughtful where you use your people and your money, you know, for me it was almost a blessing to not be rich and successful at the time I wrote the business plan, because it was like, okay, what can I do that were the minimum effort with whatever I don't have.
And John, did serendipity have anything to do with first customer? Or
Yeah.
was it much more strategy?
Well, a bit of both, I'd say. So we were a group of tech nerds. We were in love with the technology. Typically
Sure.
not the best kind of setup for a startup.
You're the early adopters. Sometimes. And they write and they sort of blog and they talk with their friends.
If you're a B2C, I would agree, but in our case, especially kind of our first 5, 7, 8 years, maybe even 10, we're very sort of, it's B2B. Like
Sure.
what we sell is a research
But
equipment. It's
even
like,
within B2B, there are also tech nerds who talk to other tech nerds. That's what I've noticed. So it's the tech nerds can be really influential. That's what I
yeah.
But you don't agree.
No, well, it depends on what kind of, if you sell equipment, you know, like really expensive and one-off, few-off, then you're selling to larger like institutions, then it might be slightly different. But for being tech nerds, I think we had a kind of an Alice approach. We fairly early on saw what we didn't have in the team and hired that, and we did that really successfully. We also looked at the technology and the type of product we could build on it, and said, okay, these are the type of products we could do that we can actually make within a reasonably short period of time.
Sure.
Who can use that? What would the value for them be? What customer would be more demanding compared to other categories? So we did that within the first 6 months of forming the company. We put those pieces in place. We established a team that had all those pieces, including making the first business plan, in which we pointed out we pull out still every year the first business plan. It's from 2001. And we look at the adoption curve of the technology as we foresaw it, and it's the reason we pull it out is because it's very spot on. Otherwise, we just forget about it. But it's kind of cool. Well, you know, there's some things that's kind of stiff, but we were very analytical in our approach of what should be the first product based on a few different categories. Who will pay the most? Who would be more forgiving for the flaws? You know, and who would be more okay with a very limited feature set that we could do. So we were quite analytical, and we have from that point went into kind of the market in that order, starting by selling kind of the 20,000 euro type of products, and now we actually sell licenses for €0.50 in certain cases, like subsets of the IP, etc. Kind of in a full product format, you can still get a product for like $100. So euros, no, €100. So from 20,000 euro to the €100, and the €100 product is by no means a worse product. It's a better product in every way. It's just like 15 years in between. So.
And then a related question to all three of you actually. You've got your first customer, but what about working with hardware? It's hard stuff, and scaling the product. How did you? Was it purely down to investment, or how did you do it in terms of solving that hardware is difficult in order to scale? So
it's definitely not just pressing a button and then it's 100 million users. I sort of envy Google and those that be like, I just launched a new feature. I actually have to build the product, and it takes lead times and months and components and sourcing. It's not. But once you start getting that machine, it works.
Is it just a matter of building that network in that case? And
When we brought in some venture capital in HMS. We had 10 years where we were self-financed, and then we used venture capital to scale really quickly. The venture capitalists looked at us and said, "You're manufacturing the hardware as well. That's not important. You shouldn't do that." But what they didn't know was that we were going really global, and to fulfill the quality demands, and we were making really small circuit boards at that time. Today it's easier to do that. So we manufactured pretty much ourselves, and they didn't want us to manufacture at all. So they were not completely right. Then a person here in this room knows these investors. So they realized, however, okay, let them do some manufacturing and then outsource the real volumes. And we said, that's no problem. Now we just need to sell the product. And then it really took off. Revenues grew by 100% that year. And we had, at that 10-year period of the strongest growth, we grew by 50% in average every year. And to scale that production is not easy. It took us 10 years to get the quality and everything totally in order to fulfill the toughest demands from the Japanese customers. But to do that, we had to have our own competence in production and quality, so we could select the right subcontractors to do the volume products.
We had exactly the same experience that we tried to sort of outsource part of it, and we ended up with really bad quality. So we decided we're going to do it. We can control our manufacturing. We decided to put it in Sweden with automation. And once you start thinking automation for hardware, because this is both electronics assembly and plastic molding, and you don't have to go to Asia. You don't have, because it's with automation, the cost is not that big. If you need a lot of people working on it. And then we could take the same setup and take that to California. And what we have noticed now, that made in Sweden and California is one of our biggest brands. In security and trust. Unfortunately, there has been, the results has been that products both from Russia and China especially from China where a lot of hardware is manufactured, has been compromised because the government has required that, and we just thought, we need to control it. We wanted to be close, but it ended up being a very good strategy to have it local.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question, which is kind of related as we move the milestones. The importance of product development and continued research. And actually, John, I think you mentioned that you have this all planned out at the beginning.
Sounds great, doesn't it?
So maybe so any viewpoints on that? I know that both yourself and John are inventors with technical backgrounds, so obviously very front of mind in your instance. But how front of mind? You're kind of building, scaling, production. How do you think about a new product line, or where is there on the hierarchy of importance, developing something new as opposed to finessing something and really taking that right to maximum where you can? How do you balance that? Where's the...
My philosophy was to do the bigger inventions and completely new product platforms, and maybe in a 5-year cycle. Of course, that depends on which business you're in. Automation is fairly long cycles, so it could take even more time. And then in between that, listen exactly to the customers and make all the small adoptions, fine-tuning of the product, but let the big innovations last a couple of years and then do it completely new from the beginning. So that has to be repeated in cycles. And that's really difficult.
Can you imagine? It sounds easy.
Yeah. So you can end up developing an electronic product or a system forever, but you have to sell what you have. That's, I think, all 3 companies, and I know Martin has also had that philosophy in Access, to really start selling, and then when you have revenues, you can do a next step and a bigger innovation again.
It's really easy to be sort of intrigued by your next shiny thing that isn't really ready, but you want to talk about it, you want to start selling it, but then you already, so finding that balance where you actually sell and talk about what you have and then continue refining and innovating on your next generation product. Because if you don't focus on what you have nothing. You know,
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm going to move on to the section which is focused on now. I'm just conscious of time as well. And given that we have such a fantastic breadth of knowledge and experience to draw from, you can say, Stina, how many you go in 2007? I hope I have these numbers correct. So that's been 11 years. So relatively speaking, new kid on the block. And John,
But compared to you guys, like,
relatively speaking.
Rookie.
compared to other companies in Silicon Valley, this is interesting because in Sweden people are really successful. Like, when I come to Silicon Valley, why aren't you bigger? Why aren't you $1 billion? Why aren't you unicorn? Why aren't you tripling? I'm doubling every year, sales and staff, and I think that's really good. And people don't think I'm aggressive enough. You know, it's just a really interesting mindset. No, I'm not. Anyway.
Yeah, so anyway, the point I was going to make is that you guys are at like different stages. You're right still in the middle of actively managing your company that you founded and started. And John, I believe recently you have become non-executive, right? And so you're focusing on VC. And Nicolas, that
I've been
happened
non-executive for a while.
for a while. You've got your fingers in many pies
Success.
right now. So I think it's so interesting that we have this fantastic breadth of knowledge and you're at different stages, respectively. And I wanted, as I say, we talked a little bit about all the experience we've taken us to now, and to take that and reflect a little bit on that. It's very easy to focus on successes, but as we touched upon, startup life is tough. And I thought it would be interesting to turn the focus in the opposite direction, to try and draw some insights and experience regarding lessons learned. So it's, some concrete tips for our startup community. Any specific problem or challenge or past failure that came to mind, and what you learned from that, and then something for our startups, the pitfalls to watch out for, so to speak. Would anyone like to start?
I have two very big ones.
Good, then you start.
Yeah. Oh God. The first one was when I wanted to move to California. I had Swedish investors who thought that was a really bad idea. Because Americans, they are cowboys, they will steal your money, and they have a really corrupt and dysfunctional legal systems. You will definitely be sued. and by the way, you have no contacts and no one knows about you in Silicon Valley, so how would you be able to succeed? And that was my plan, to be there, without actually knowing anyone. And I knew it in my gut. You sort of, sometimes there are, I think all entrepreneurs, sometimes you just sort of feel something and you can't really put the words, you don't have the data, you don't have all the sort of logic behind it. But in that time, I know, like, this is it. And what I learned with that I wasn't patient enough to try to describe and calm down my investors and make them feel confident that I had all figured out and they should just be really calm. But when they started to say, this is not a good idea, I literally shut them off because I thought they were old and slow and didn't get the point. And that's actually a very bad idea. A bad relationship to investors.
Sure.
Because I screw up my relationship with some investors who said Stina is ruthless and she doesn't listen to us and she's now going to be this cowboy in California. We have no idea. She's going to blow up the company and the money. And we had this crisis meeting where they were planning to fire me.
Wow.
And I realized, God, how did I get here? What did I do wrong? Maybe I should learn to communicate a little better. But at the time, it's serendipity, whatever it was, actually really helped me because I had just started the dialogue with Google. They started buying my product, and I was sitting in a situation where this new standard was being formed.
Sure.
And I told my investors at the time, can you just give me 3 months? Please, I know maybe I could have done things better, but give me 3 months. I'm going to sort it out. And 2.5 months later, we signed the first $2 million deal with Google that eventually became the standard. But if that hadn't have happened, I would just be one of those failing, stupid, ruthless entrepreneurs. So you never know. But so in my case, the second one was a year ago. I said, okay, now we're taking off. I need an American sales leader who understands how to sell my product. So I hired a guy from Oracle who he had a lot of American self-confidence, and he came in and it was a disaster for our company because we were very technology and geeky driven, and I thought that I needed not to be technology driven. But that was actually our DNA, and that's why we were liked by our customers. So I had to, 3 months ago, I had to let him go. And that was because I thought that you sort of start getting I had bad self-confidence. I feel like, oh, I need to be someone else than what I am. I need to sort of learn up, I need to grow up, I need to be American, or whatever I needed to. And I brought in that piece that, it was not. And now I'm trying to figure out how do I bring in a sales leader who has the values that we have, who's technical and innovative and quirky, and have those. It doesn't have to be a sort of the more aggressive.
I got you.
Yeah, and that is a challenge.
Sure.
But so the second lesson learned is to not try to be anyone else who you're not. And have the confidence, and it's okay to be different. It's okay to figure out a different way to sell. And I actually realized my customer don't want to talk to salespeople. They only want to talk to technical people. So the whole idea of having a sales leader who was not technical was a complete stupid idea. Because we are trying to win the trusted nerds, the geeks, the security engineers, the CISOs, and they are not interested in a salesperson who comes with a fluffy PowerPoint. They won't really get into the heart of problems directly. So now I'm hiring a sales force that's super technical and super geeky.
That's really interesting.
But I had to sort of realize that I was on the right path. I thought I needed something different. I'm trying to get back, but still find ways to be more scalable. Anyway.
Any parts for you?
For startups, I would say the importance of having a demanding customer. Revenues from a demanding customer is much more important than the amount of venture capital.
I completely agree.
Really?
Yes.
On the
None
other
of
hand,
us.
to have that customer normally gets very big, and you get dependent on that customer. So at a certain point, you have to start searching more customers, otherwise you will be too dependent on your customers. And then I could do, since I had I see the same problems coming up in companies I now invest in when they scale. So I had some time to reflect. So probably I could do a seminar in an hour where it would take over an hour to explain all the points where HMS would have gone bankrupt and never would have succeeded. But one of those are to get too dependent on a big customer. So it's a balance. You have to have a very good, big, demanding customer, but you also have to search more well in time. So the really first big customer in HMS went bankrupt in the crisis '93, where interest rates went very high. Nobody understands that today, since we have negative interest rates. It could happen again. Anyway, that customer had a thin balance sheet, and they just went bankrupt. And that was tough. This close that HMS went bankrupt as well. And then later on, I think one mistake was that when I brought in venture capital and I got this extremely nice board, I thought, now this board will solve all my problems. Big mistake. They did very good things for the company, but they didn't solve my problems. It's still the management team and that has to run the company.
For some reason, I'm with you. As an entrepreneur, so many decisions and big things are on you, and you sort of dream, oh, someone can come and help you. And you had people like, they're going to help me, but a lot of things still rely on you. And the core management team continue to do that, even if you bring in the best investors and the best board. I have the same experience. Yeah. It's up to you, because no one else is actually there in the trenches. The other people are sort of floating around on it. And unless you're there every day, full time, it's difficult to really own the problem.
John, a particular problem or past failure that especially comes to mind and that's learned?
Where to start? Well, with Tobii, we've definitely had a few different moments when it's been like this close to everything just folding. But One that springs to mind is actually in the previous company, as a founder, CEO of Jens Technologies, we got the wrong owner set up. And we went through the time 2001, 2002 in that owner constellation, and that was a tough time.
Okay.
And we got caught with the wrong owners, with the wrong agreements to be able to get out of that situation. So that company was sold because of the, well, there was a lot of stress in the system obviously as well. So, but I learned something from that that I then took to my next company.
Okay.
In terms of how to do the agreements, how to pick your investors, how to interact with your investors as well. In terms of now I would never collaborate as an entrepreneur with an investor that wants to be on the other side of the table. I insist on being on the same side of the table. We have the same mission, we have the same ambition, we share the same agenda. And if you as an investor would like to see it differently, you insist on saying that we have different agendas, then it's not the right partner, I think. And one needs to make sure that the agendas are aligned. So that and a whole bunch of kind of technical knowledge about how to write agreements, etc. That was really a key takeaway from that journey.
I think that's about managing expectations of the investors.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That's the key thing. And some investors might, without even knowing that they're doing it, they might lure you into promising more things.
They love to push you all the time.
Yeah, of course, but it's
Like,
very
can you do
unhealthy
more?
when it becomes like an entrepreneur promising more than they're comfortable promising, failing on those promises, and the investor then, of course, criticizing those failures.
Sure.
That's a very unhealthy kind of spiral. So I'm not saying that an investor should not challenge and put kind of high requirements on development, etc. But there are different ways to manage that. I think I became after that first, let's call it an incident. I became better at that.
Great.
So that's a takeaway. And I've coached a lot of friends, other founders on that topic.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I think drawing a close to this section, I think it's really heartening to hear actually that the near-death experiences and coming close to bankruptcy, that it happens to massively successful companies like yourself as well.
And sometimes there are things that are not in your control. In your case, it was your customer. Even if you had all, your ducks in a row, they didn't.
Great. Thank you for that. That was really insightful, actually, really inspiring. The final section, and we have 10 minutes left, I wanted to focus on the future. And because the three of you are kind of visionary in that, Nicolas created IoT before it was IoT in 1988, before the coin was even turned. Is it something that you foresaw, that it would turn into this huge thing, and with Stina and her whole thing with internet security in basically the entire Silicon Valley? Is it 9 out of 10?
We have actually 19 of the 20 internet companies.
Yeah.
The top are our customers. We say 9 out of 10 because it's, it's a marketing thing.
But just that vision of, and now that was it 10, 11 years later, and then of course with John and I tracking as well, we go back to Tobii, but the applications of that is so vast. And I think did it start off with being an assistive technology, and then you branched to different fields? Because
we started with research.
Researchers. That was the first one. Okay.
They were the most forgiving, right?
Okay.
If you give them a completely new tool, they would, they can work, they can even code to some extent,
sure.
They're willing to reboot the machine every 30 minutes. Just as long as they get something that the other researchers don't have, so that they can be first at publishing that paper.
Okay.
No, it's great, and they have these year-end budgets, etc. They need to invest, and they like investing in inventory, but trying to sell a 30,000 euro piece of equipment, you need those type of people that want to own an expensive piece of device. So that's where we started. People with disabilities, they are actually relying on this device to be their communication aid, right? And they physically can't press the reboot button either. So they are much more demanding. But if you provide people with a voice and an interactive, something that they can interact with, if they've had nothing else, you're basically doing something that nobody else can do. And that in itself is kind of what was our entry kind of into that. So it was hugely popular, like when we came out as the first eye-controlled computer for all the people that had absolutely nothing else. And those were the people with a desperate need of communicating, interacting, doing things, right? Because they can't go out the door. So.
But my point was that with eye tracking technology, I've read also recently that you guys have branched into tech integration with gaming, so consumer electronics.
Right.
So just that, the vision that this could expand and become a lot bigger than when you very first started. So to focus on what trends right now, or any patterns that you see today. And this is without limits, so you can think in terms of economy, technology, societal, environmental, or anything completely different. But any pattern or trend today that you think will have a significance in the long term. Long term, I can mean 10, 20, 50 years ahead. Anything right now. So this is a throw it out there. And actually at this point, I would like to open to the audience as well, to questions as well.
So in my case, I had almost like a puberty when we started working with the freedom of the press. Because this is a really hot topic, democracy.
Sure.
Open, secure internet, that is, where we can protect human rights and democracy. It's sort of probably one of the bigger challenges in our modern society at the time. And internet is playing a vital role in it. And we started working with freedom of the press, who were giving out these keys to journalists and dissidents across the globe, and I felt very good about it, and we say we can donate, we are profitable. So these, you mentioned numbers, we're doing about $500 million in revenue. This year we're going to catch up with you. But not really on that there yet. And we were 160 people.
Did you say $500 million?
$500 million in revenue.
$500 million Swedish.
Swedish krona. No, sorry, Swedish. Oh God, yeah, not the dollar. No.
That's next year.
$500 million Swedish krona.
Don't disclose the 19 numbers.
No. And when you're profitable, you can sort of like, what do I want to do? How can I help? And I'm going to give away keys to journalists and dissidents across the globe. I'm going to work with freedom of the press and a few others. And I got an email from a journalist from Russia who said, "Thank you for saving my life." He had set up a key. He was working on a story that was critical to the government, and that some of his co-workers had not set up this key, and they're no longer alive. And then I'm like, God, this is much bigger than internet security. This is about securing democracy. And I was like, I had almost goosebumps at the time, and I realized this is, what should I do with this? After that, we started collaborating within the standards organization. We've now attracted the payments provider, IoT, encryption, and we're seeing that the code that we wrote for one application, just secure login, is getting into sort of almost like a foundation for future internet security. And I feel so blessed. And I'm not religious, because I'm born in Sweden. You're not religious. Very few people are religious. I like to use the word blessed and fortunate that God, I can actually contribute, because the code is now getting into IT, into payments, into authentication, into platforms, into browser, to support a free, open, secure internet for everyone, where security is not managed and controlled by government or big companies. It's actually more democratized, and we're request from cryptocurrency blockchain companies, can we do this to do sort of more distributed trust models that are not sort of the traditional banks and with your technology, and it's both scary and fascinating. Like, oh, this is what we built has a bigger effect. That wasn't the original idea. And I'm almost a little afraid also, how could it potentially be misused? You know, because sort of once you put out something there, you know, like Nobel, he put out the dynamite, and he was, you know, he wanted it for a good thing, and you know, now, and we, I don't know, this is filmed, is it? Yeah, so that was a problem, because I was going to say something cool, but I'm not going to say it. But I got these really interesting customers and use cases that are, that makes me think about, you know, what is the role I am playing, what is the right thing to do, who is allowed to have my technology, you know, to be secure and safe and untrackable, and you know, because maybe you want the fraudster to be trackable. Do you see what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
Okay, trends. Then I'll try and go down to Internet of Things. It's all these projections of how many devices we will have in 2022. Is it 50 billion? I don't know. I don't think it's gonna be really that quick. So maybe I'm a bit more. It's gonna be a lot, but I don't think the development will be quite that quick. So there is lots of time to start new and more companies that are involved in IoT. Then I'm really concerned about interoperability, because still companies build closed systems where they can interact with other systems. There are no real solutions to that yet, so that's an interesting area. I'm also surprised how many, even big companies, do develop IoT solutions where it seems they don't provide enough value to the customer. They can do it to collect data about, take your dishwasher at home. I changed ours and I realized there was a Wi-Fi in it, so of course I connect it and see what can I do with the dishwasher. It comes from a very well-respected big German manufacturer. More or less nothing. I could.
What would you want to do with your one?
And then yeah, it's ordering the new dishwashing consumables.
Sure.
But I think that's easier to tell Alexa in the kitchen that I need to order new dishwasher tablets or whatever. So there are lots of solutions coming out where there is no real value for the customer. And there are solutions that provide real value for the customer. Then the last trend in IoT is of course that more and more critical systems are being connected, and where they provide real value to the customer. And you get almost addicted to that. So the reliability of the systems will be an issue. And the security, because now we're talking about security, about people logging into a computer and hacking something, but in 5 to 10 years it will be devices that talk to each other, and that's quite interesting. So that
We're
might
here
be
to
your
help.
next
We should collaborate.
business plan.
Thank you.
Oh, you should put eye tracking into those devices. So maybe I can
Yes.
In the dishwasher.
That would make sense. Yeah, so I tried to do a bit of trend spotting now as I'm an investor. And there are several really big mega trends, of course, IoT and that whole movement is one. With kind of my background from Tobii, which is an input modality for many people, it's actually not used as an input modality for in most cases. It's used to allow a machine to know unintrusively where you are, what you're doing.
Sure.
We are trying our uttermost to make the technology invisible, smaller, and invisible spectra, etc., etc. So we are more part of the intelligent machine concept. And I think that's a trend that has barely started. I think, especially now when AI and kind of the whole deep learning, etc., is so much in the discussion and on the agenda. I'm usually more or less every day struck by how dumb machines are, and there seems to be a disconnect. There's this enormous mother brain AI trend, a lot of money and brains going into that, but then on the very pragmatic, the very device that I'm actually using, your dishwasher, for example, there seems to be a huge disconnect. I've spoken to some big computer companies about these AI projects that they're running, but they can't even get the simple things right in terms of knowing who I am, or where I usually send my emails, or what my usual preferences are. My OS doesn't fully understand and use the knowledge of what languages I speak even. So there are so many things, everything from using my toaster to using my OS, where the machines can be so much more intelligent in what they know and making use of what they know of us. And in that context, of course, sensors play a huge role. I don't think your screen should be on if nobody's looking at it, for example. There's a lot of, maybe graphics should be rendered in higher quality where you can actually see it. I'd argue that 98% of all GPU flops made today were in vain, because nobody saw them. Maybe nobody weren't even there, right? So that's where the machines are today, and there will be a lot of companies coming in and kind of sweeping the big entrenched companies away by just having more of a demanding user in mind when they design a machine that knows who you are, where you are, what you're doing, what you'd like to do. That's just the basis for product design going forward, I think.
Great. Thank you. And do we have, I think maybe we've gone 5 minutes over, but do we have any questions from the audience that we can have another few minutes? Any at all?
Yeah, I have a question mostly for John and Nicolas. It's a more private question. If you would like to tell us a little about the feelings and experiences when moving away from executive position in the companies that you have founded, can you tell us a little bit? What was the feelings and what do you think about it?
Oh, should I start?
Yeah.
Oh, it's difficult. In my case, I had the vision and the mission I had to build internationally leading communication technology for automation, to have our Anybus products in all over the world. We were selling them in more than 50 countries. The mission was to build a new Swedish high-tech public company that could continue to grow. So it was more or less, after a few iterations of the business plan, was more or less mission completed. And I had worked so much, traveled around the world, built subsidiaries, meeting customers, so I was actually a bit tired of traveling. I've been in Japan 37 times. However, I still go there. That's a nice place to go. So I had decided, and I met my wife. I got a daughter, and then I realized I had been CEO for 21 years. That's pretty long term. And then I said, now I want to do a next step, and I want to help other companies to grow and become international success. Even if I started the company and took it all the way to a successful listing, I think the sweet spot for me is when the company really takes off, maybe at 25 to 50 million in revenue, and it starts expanding internationally. So that's more where I find the real joy to build other companies. And after HMS, I have made built one more company with an entrepreneur and a venture capital company. I find enough joy in that, in the boardroom, but however, the boardroom never gets really as nearly as fun as being in the management team when a company really takes off. And in a big company, in the board, the biggest one I'm in now is Cybercom, has revenues of 1.5 billion and 1,500 employees. It's pretty fun, but not nearly as fun as the stage where you're right now. And when I was in that position, I envied the other side, that would be nice to be in the board instead. So that's the short story.
I mean, it's sort of, I don't know, is it called in English, depressive? Monodepressive, I don't know, is that what is it?
Bipolar.
Yeah, I feel that my job is sort of like that, you know, like, wow, oh God, oh, wow. It's always sort of big and challenged and up and down, but it is a very, you really need to grow as a person. Some people say, have you gone any personal development training? No, I just became an entrepreneur. I started a company. I had to manage through the way and learn through all my mistakes and managing people and communicating and get rid of all my stupid ego and flaws and everything that was sort of stopping me from growth. You know, it's interesting how even my kids say, Steve, you've become a better mom. Thank you.
Did you want to answer that?
Yeah, for me it was easy. And that was the short answer. The longer answers, I've always tried to make myself redundant. I've tried to hire and train honestly the people around me so that they can do everything and do what I have been doing and do it better. And many times I've been frustrated because there's some magic around the founder. I mean, there's something about it comes with your equity stake and everything and heritage, and it's like it is hard for somebody to replace a founder, actually. But then one day you actually see, for me, was in several kind of steps or parts of my job, that this guy or girl, she's actually doing exactly what I wanted to do, and she's just doing it much better in every way. So great, and then you kind of hand over that, and as that happens, you find yourself managing a too small a piece for it to make sense, and then you try to get somebody to take that, and of course they do it better. And at that point, for me it was in 16, after the IPO, my co-founder stepped up his game a lot from being two CEOs. He took over the CEO role. He did it better than I did to hope for. He managed the whole being public, that perspective extremely well. Other people stepped up too, and that was my trigger. So towards the end of 16, I was just so happy, happier than I'd ever been with the management team. And that was really the starting point of me kind of winding down and making sure that everything was set. And that's what I wanted to do. I never wanted anybody to feel that I was rushing out the door, but I was on my way. With their blessing and everything, and now the difficult thing was to decide what to do next.
Sure.
That was the difficult kind of thing. Yeah.
I got some really good advice from a really good mentor when quickly, and on that subject he said, do nothing for at least 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And then I spoke to him afterwards, and he knew nobody can manage that. An entrepreneur can't manage that.
Like you as well.
I mean, I guess nobody of us plays golf.
No.
No. No.
Time.
So, but there is a risk. You go doing lots of things. You invest in lots of companies. But you should be really selective and think about exactly which kind of companies and so on. So,
Thank you.
I did almost nothing for a while at least.
I did nothing
Maybe
for 3 weeks.
6 months.
It's a personal best, honestly.
I think maybe we can have one more questions, and then there's some time for mingling. Do we have one more questions?
an ecosystem question. So I run a company called Whatty, we're a machine learning company. Every machine learning company I know want to make their own data collection or like be part of the data collection because that's what you need to do in order to get the stuff you want. And we cannot find like hardware guys to save our lives, like really good, like super talented. We used to have, Nokia and Ericsson and all this stuff, and now I have no idea if our ecosystem is going to manage to be part of that. So I'd be really curious to hear what you're seeing.
Finding really good hardware talent is you're absolutely right, it is difficult. It is not a growing talent pool to find those people. We have problems. I don't know.
I think there's been I'm kind of best on the other side here, but I think the fascination for software and earning a quick dollar, scalable business models, it's been a little bit too much push for that. Come to me with an app that you can scale in 6 months. The hardware will always be a bit more hard labor, potentially not necessarily slower growth, but it will definitely encompass certain types of hard things that you need to do. You set up manufacturing, production, logistics, so there will be some parts of that, even though if you don't have to do it yourself. And that has not been seen as sexy. And that's also the reason why the talent has not been growing. I'd consider importing talent, because they're like in Romania, India, even Ireland, you can get real talent. And now Stockholm, thanks to a lot of the good incubators, the good startups, and some of the unicorns, Stockholm is on that scene. Right? You can hire people. We can have an ad out in India. You can have people moving here for working with you guys, and that's what you need to do if you want to have. If we talk hardware, as in hardware coding, like you're setting up your FPGAs and your ASICs and stuff like that chips and silica. You can now, since just 3-4 years maybe, you can actually get people to move here for a job.
I can also really feel the difference that Stockholm is a very high tech hub.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's one thing that's interesting here. The latest Swedish real unicorn, Icicle. Is that a hardware company? Yes.
Hardware and software.
Yeah, they had never been where they are if they hadn't had the device.
No.
It never been possible to do Icicle without the card reader.
In the early days, they were really a hardware company.
Exactly. And that's the enabling thing to gather the data for Icicle. And they have exactly the same problem with the hardware development. If you talk to them, it's really interesting. But without that device, they hadn't been there.
Yeah.
So it's I agree.
And it is hard to find local homegrown talent. Like you can find you set up a satellite office in Linköping or something. And maybe one in Gothenburg or Malmö. Then you can tap into a little bit bigger pool. But then if you're really growing, you need to tap into foreign talent pools as well. But
roughly speaking, about half of the people in the building here don't speak Swedish. Just so you know.
Yeah.
60% of the people in our office here in Stockholm are Swedish as a language, and it's actually been an asset for us to not require knowing Swedish, because then we can hire them. So we just say you don't have to speak Swedish; you just have to be really good.
Tobii's Stockholm office has 48 nationalities, and I think the R&D team, which is probably 350 people here in Stockholm, they must be 30 of those nationalities. So.
But it is correct. It is difficult to find really good software engineers as well. So software gurus, but the real hardware wizards are even more difficult to get. And in a typical company, I don't know exactly today, but when I left, we had about 70 software engineers in HMS, and we had 9-10 hardware. And among these 10, there were like 3 real wizards. And the importance of that is that the hardware guys, if now the company has some kind of hardware in the product, they determine the cost of the product. So that's the whole future profitability comes down to the
Their
drawing
ability.
board and how innovative they can be in making an ASIC, for example, or finding other hardware solutions that press down the cost. That can also determine the success of the company to reach the really high volume applications. Many startups make a great product, seems totally outstanding, and when they go to the really big customers, maybe after 5 years, they find out the product is great, the software is outstanding, but it's just too expensive. There are no margins for the whole chain, and they fail. So it's difficult, but you can find them. There are also Swedish good hardware wizards around.
No names.
It's one thing if you only need 10, but I mean, so from our perspective, more than half of our R&D staff is hardware.
Yeah.
So we're consuming just in Stockholm alone 200.
Yeah.
So that's when you then it's really getting difficult to find and scale. Like you want to set up your own ASIC team. You need, if you want to have 20 people in an ASIC team, that is hard. Well, Sweden has probably been better. It's these things kind of, you see people move from hardware into software, but never the other way around.
Okay.
It's too bad that Martin isn't here.
Yeah.
He has even more hardware engineers.
Right.
And
Yeah.
In South
He loves
Sweden,
ASICs.
when
He's doing that in the world.
Yeah, he's looking at me
When,
in his kitchen.
Canon acquired Axis 3 years ago, they were 800 people in development, of which 775 in Lund, 25 in China, just because they needed them for a specific purpose. So also to run development in one site is quite important. You can have several sites for development, but that's, you really have to know how to manage that. And since I'm the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, everybody was concerned that the same would happen. That happened to Sony and Ericsson when they joined mobile phones. They had 2,000 employees in Lund, and now it went down. But can anybody guess how many engineers Axis have now? They had 800 3 years ago in development.
12.
You're right. So there are engineers around.
In Lund still?
In Lund. Quite impressive.
I think we were gonna, unless there are any burning questions, I think